over the last few years, free-to-play games have completely taken over the world, with more and more studios deciding to hop on the trend so that as many people as possible get the chance to be able to enjoy them. And at first you might think that free-to-play games are a net positive for the gaming community because, you know, they are free and who doesn't love free stuff. But are free-to-play games really free though? And I'm not talking about item shops or battle passes or even money for that matter. I'm talking about the fact that these immersive gaming experiences that come without a price tag on it might have a lot of costs hidden underneath, because unfortunately, like the old saying goes, well, nothing in life is truly free. And while there's no denying that gaming today is the most accessible it's ever been for a lot of people that otherwise wouldn't be able to even afford it, the free-to-play model has also created one of the biggest pitfalls for players to fall into, and at the end of the day, these large studios always end up getting what they want. But how do things exactly get to this point? Like, how did we let things get so bad? Well, the free-to-play model isn't some revolutionary concept that the Epic Games Store and Fortnite cooked up in the lab all the way back in 2017. It's actually been around for a while, and it first started showing up in the late 90s, early 2000s in MMO games like RuneScape or like even Neopets, where you had access to the game for free, but some of the content was locked behind a paid membership. The first game to ever use a free-to-play model was a trivia game from 1999 called Quiz. The game featured an item shop, advertisements, and even premium currencies, and it was made by game developer Lee Shong-ch... I don't know how to pronounce that. But the point is that this is the person who later went on to create MapleStory. Eventually, game developers started experimenting with this model in genres outside of MMORPGs, and over time it just kept changing and evolving into the modern practices that you see today in most free-to-play games. The main thing is that once studios realized just how much of a cash cow this game model is inside of the gaming industry, well, it changed game development forever, because now you have the biggest studios in the world working with experts every single day, using psychological warfare on their player base and figure out what's the best way to get you hooked on their free product. And if you're asking yourself why would they do that, well, it's because free-to-play revenue makes up for 80% of total games revenue in the industry, and it has the earning potential for game developers to be practically unlimited. And with more and more studios deciding to opt for this free-to-play model instead of the traditional pay-up-front model, well, it's been changing the way we consume games for the longest time, arguably for the worse. Let's go back to that psychological warfare for a moment, because from the very second a studio manages to get you inside their lobby, everything from start to finish is actually designed to make you feel like you're missing out if you're not spending money. It's kind of like how casinos are deliberately designed to not have any sharp turns or any windows, and the reason they do that is because they don't want you to be thinking like, oh, should I go left or right here? It's getting dark, I wonder what time it is now. You know, casinos want as little decision making going on in your brain as possible, so that way you don't have space or time to think about anything other than spending money. So let's say that you want to log into Fortnite for a few games, but you have zero intention of buying anything, right? From the moment you log in, you get nagged about the battle pass in the item shop. That's one. The first thing you see in your lobby is your default skin character reminding you that you haven't spent any money yet. That's two. The pre-game lobby before the match starts, you think it's just a simple waiting room, but it's actually designed in a way for everybody to get the chance to show off what skins they bought, what emotes they're using, and it's another hit at you going like, hey, look at all these people who are spending money, you're the weird one here. And when you finally get eliminated in the game, the kill cam is just another way for the game to remind you like, hey, Master Chief beat you, Ariana Grande beat you, look at their skins, you don't have any yet. So there's really no way for you to be able to enjoy the game without being constantly reminded that you're not spending money in the game and that you could be getting more out of the experience if you just drop a little bit of money here and there. And for a person like me that's aware of these design choices, I can just look at them and just brush them off because of whatever, but that doesn't mean I'm not still being constantly exposed to them. And now imagine how that must feel for someone who doesn't know that they're being marketed to constantly and they don't really understand why they keep getting convinced to spend money. Like, you have to remember that a game's main win condition isn't to get you more victory royales, by the way, it's to slowly wear the user down until they cave in and buy something from the item shop. Like, you win the game when you're the last person standing in Fortnite. Fortnite wins the game when they get you to buy something from the shop. So you can see how all of this can start to take an emotional toll on someone who's just trying to sit down and have some fun after a day's work. You're constantly being made feel like you're less than the other players for not spending money. And trust me, that's not even the worst way a game studio can interfere with your gaming experience just to be able to get what they want out of you, because even if they don't manage to get their hands in your wallet by draining your emotional battery, they're still gonna make you waste your time and effort and actively make things more difficult for you. And this is an issue that if you've ever worked with game development, then you're kind of already aware of it, but for the most part, the gaming community a lot of the times isn't even aware that this is happening. But behind every single in-game achievement, behind every rare item in the game, someone at some point was making the active decision to determine how much time it takes a player to get said achievement. And if free-to-play games are all about slowly chipping away at your soul, draining you of all your happiness and joy in this world until you finally cave in and buy the Founder's Pass, then that means that the game developers have a huge incentive to artificially inflate the amount of grinding you need to to do for certain rare items to make them way harder than they realistically need to be, just to either make you feel more invested and spend more time in the game, or to pressure you into giving in and pay the microtransaction that's gonna accelerate the process anyways. And I know that this example isn't technically free to play, but for a subscription-based game like World of Warcraft that I used to play a lot back in college, a little bit too much, well, certain achievements, certain rare mounts, certain things can take you months and even years to get. Like, the amount of grinding and time and dedication you have to put into the game is just ridiculous in some cases, honestly. And remember that all of that grind that's necessary in the game, all of that was designed by choice. And it's a way for the developers to tell you, like, hey, if you want the rare mount, if you want the rare achievement, all of that is going to take you X amount of subscription cycles minimum, and that's guaranteed pay for us. So when you compare that type of completionist design and gameplay versus what you see in the more traditional model of just outright buying video games, sometimes what you can feel is that on one side, the developers are just playing with your time and effort to make you play their game for longer and trick you into spending more money, versus on the other side where it feels like the developer decided that this is as hard as the achievement is going to be, not because I gain any benefit from it, but because that's my vision of what the game is really like. And to talk a little more about the free-to-play versus just traditional outright buying of video games, because the way you measure if the game you're playing is successful or not is really dependent on what type of game you're talking about, because free-to-play versus traditional, they both have two very different win conditions. The first one for traditional video games is how many copies can you sell? Doesn't matter if the game's good, if it's bad, if it's hot garbage, the price of the video game versus the amount of copies that you sell, is that more than the cost of developing the game, and that's how you determine if the game is profitable or not. A good example of this is Nickelodeon All-Stars Brawl 1. The developers practically had a non-existent budget to work with, and what we ended up with was unfortunately a disaster, to be honest, but Nickelodeon All-Stars Brawl did sell a lot of copies, so it technically completed its win condition. Meanwhile, when we're talking about free-to-play games, the key metric that you're looking for is how many concurrent players can you have, and how many spending opportunities can you offer those players, because the more people that you can get to try out your game for free, the more likely it is that you'll find someone who's willing to pay different amounts of money for your microtransactions. And if you've ever played a gacha game like Genshin Impact, for example, that's exactly how their model works, because technically, you don't need everybody to be spending money on the game, you just need to attract as many players as possible to try to get the whales to play your game. And those are the ones that are dropping thousands of dollars on summons just to try to get the new waifu that comes out or whatever. And the best part about the free-to-play model is that you don't have to worry about different titles or sequels or anything like that. You know, you just have to pop off once with your current game and then just slowly start updating that game over time. So basically, you got yourself a money printer. All you have to do is maintain the money printer so that way the money printer keeps printing money. And that's why everybody's so desperate these days to release a free-to-play live service game, because there's just so much money to be made there. But arguably, I think the worst part about this new wave of free-to-play games that we've been getting is that unfortunately, a lot of these studios started abusing the idea of releasing a game under early access as an excuse to not only ship a broken product, but also start monetizing it from day one. Because if you want to launch a week-long open beta to get feedback from the community and see how the game is going before full release, that's a different story. You know, Overwatch 1 did that, and honestly, there was no problem with it whatsoever. But the main issue here is that the product that a lot of these companies are shipping under the early access tag are intentionally being left unfinished, and they're just put on an indefinite open beta with no signs of ever really going full release. So you as the player, you basically just get promoted to game tester by the company without getting paid, of course. And you know, for someone who likes to be an early supporter and likes to get involved in seeing the development process, then more power to you, you know? Of course, I do the same thing. But honestly, most of the time, it just feels like the bigger studios are just taking advantage of all the good faith that the players have in wanting to support a game's development, and we see this happening time and time again, where you have a cool looking game that launches, right? Everybody gets hooked, everybody's spending money on it to support the team with the hopes of getting more updates in the future, and then once the player base dies down from the initial free-to-play spike, the developers just abandon the game, and then the players are just left feeling frustrated and forgotten about. I can name so many different games that have gone through this very same cycle time and time again, but it is just the reality of things. So while the free-to-play business model has opened the gates for some really cool titles to be able to come out, and it's made it super accessible for anybody that's ever wanted to get into gaming, well, it's also come with its fair share of problems that's been affecting the players, whether it be financially, physically, psychologically. And not even get to talk about the privacy concerns, because all these free-to-play games, they're tracking your spending habits, your gameplay behavior, just like any social media. If a company's willing to give you something absolutely for free, then that usually means that you're the real product they're trying to sell. So in this case, all the information they can gather off of you, that's what they're trying to sell to the advertisers. Nothing in life is truly for free. Always remember that. And yeah, that's all I really want to talk about with you guys, so thank you guys for watching.